Caravan. You've been subjected to a highly sophisticated form of propaganda.
It's just what you need and not what you don't.
Just what you need and not what you don't. Yesterday, there was a little bit of an anomaly that occurred, I noticed. And I think I've solved that problem. My hat appears to be half cocked, just like this show. And I want to welcome you all to a special, very special broadcast today. We're broadcasting live from the former United States in the calendar year 2021. It's April 4th. April 4th. It's the fourth month, which is April, and it's the 30th. Hi, I'm Tony Caravan, and you're listening to The Morning Show live at 4:44 a.m. I am drinking out of one of my morning show camping style mugs that are available at TonyCaravanLive.com. And I encourage you to get it. I also have a pain in the side of my mouth. These are very interesting times as the communist Chinese and the historically Chinese have said. So pay attention.
I can no longer sit back and allow communist infiltration, communist indoctrination, communist subversion, and the international communist conspiracy to sap and impurify all of our precious bodily fluids.
So what is that line, art imitates life or life imitates art? Well, life is definitely imitating art. If you could, you could call that art. Kubrick's movies were could be considered art. But man, human speak is ridiculous. I always start these shows off a little bit weird with some sound effects for those who've just tuned in randomly. And I'm drinking a coffee, iced coffee. You could might be able to make out if I can get just the right angle. Let's see if we can put some light on the subject. Yeah, you can't really see. You can't see. You can't see anything. These computers stink. It's a homemade iced coffee that I cold brewed overnight. My chair just slipped down to the ground. You can trust the man who wears a star. An old shirt I haven't had on in a long time. I thought after yesterday dressing like some kind of guru guy, I thought I'd put on a legitimate shirt. Plus, it's a little bit cooler. It's windy here. I'm not going to play the NOAA weather forecast, but here is
Weekend weather.
And it looks something like this, and it doesn't really look good. I have to look at an angle over here because I got a microphone. You can't see. Anyway, it's 48 degrees here in the mid-Atlantic states. Like I say, I'm not in the Northeast. I'm closer to the Mason-Dixon line than I am to the, anywhere else. Friday, which is today, it's currently 48, as I said. Tonight, it's going to be high of 52, but tonight's going to be 34 degrees. Which in my neck of the woods, 34 degrees. There's a freeze warning. Means it's going to get down to like 30. So we're talking below 0 Celsius for you. Neighbors to the north and Brits and Aussies and Kiwis and all those that still use Euro friends that use Celsius. Saturday is going to be sunny, 61 for the high and 54 for the low is what they're claiming, but I don't believe so. I've seen the NOAA say it's going to be in the 30s again at night. Sunday is 10% chance of rain, 75 for the high and 59 for the low. So there's a freeze warning out for tonight. The wind gusts are predicted later this afternoon to be as high as 50 miles per hour. It's quite annoying, though, that the AI bot that is on NOAA radio, which is this green thing here, Let's see here.
Tuesday, showers likely and a slight chance of thunderstorms. Highs in the lower 70s. Chance of rain 70%.
That's the NOAA chat bot or talk bot, speak bot next to the Jackery, which is charging, or not charging, which is actually using, giving us light. Let there be light. Some days it's so damn bright that it's out of control. Today, for some reason, we barely have enough light to let you see great solar stuff. I had to dim it. That's Maggie AI who's like kind of sneaking in, and that thing says game over. It's a cap that we sell. All right, we got most of that stuff out of the way. I think so. Now it's time for a little bit of show and tell. Show me and tell me. So let's get into it. Once upon a time, there was this thing where you used to get software in boxes. Do you remember that? Software came in boxes, and this is like the original Apple X, and they thought they were being like super cool, right? And you owned this. You either paid for it, right? Or got it with your new machine. And then once they got into it, they started doing stuff like this, right? Snow leopard. They started naming them. And then, of course, they created iLife. See that? And that was like the iMovie. And this was the good version, actually. Steve Jobs was definitely still around here. And this was the good version of... and then they had like just this, which was just like a black box that says designed in Cupertino, California. And then there was something called iWork. And that had Pages and Keynote. That was their answer to Microsoft stealing the market from them. All right. And like I say, you owned these boxes, so this software package was yours. No cloud, no nothing. You could get updates through your computer via they didn't call it the cloud then, whatever they called it. That said, same with Adobe. You used to buy your Adobe software. I was looking for my Adobe boxes. I know I've got them because I loaned one to a friend of mine, and she tried to hook it up on her. Is that it? No, I don't know what the heck that is. It's a book. But anyway, I've got Photoshop, InDesign, programs like that. And you owned them. Then they switched over and they created, then it was like Adobe C something. Let me see if I mouse over. Yeah, CS2, Adobe Photoshop CS2, Adobe InDesign CS2. And those I purchased and I had the boxes for. And I'm looking over here because this is the machine that I keep my sound effects on.
It's an excursion into the odd and into the very, very different.
And anyway, so it's a G5. It's an old computer, not old, well, old in computing terms, meaning it's over 10 years old. It still functions fine. It's got a lot of memory, storage capacity, and it just starts up like that. Unlike this one, which is a much newer computer, souped up with 16 gigabytes of DRAM, 2 terabytes of memory, and some kind of double quad core or whatever processor, they have. And so to make a long story longer, I can use Photoshop on that, but I keep this off. I have to keep this off. I've said this to people before. I have to keep this off the internet because if it's connected to the internet, they'll come down and they'll do something to, totally make it not work, even though you own it. Because I had the cloud, I quit the cloud. It's extortion. It was $57 a month, or something like that. $54 I was paying to use these various software programs. That's like $600 a year. Well, some of those, I'm not paying $600 a year. In 10 years, that's $6,000. See, people don't think like how they mess with us and how they manipulate us and use us. But anyway, back to the weather, this, come on.
Weekend weather.
Back to the weekend weather. It is blowing like crazy outside right now. And I don't know where you are, if you're experiencing that or not, but this is crazy. And it was been heading across the country, and it's working. It's going to eventually work its way into the Northeast. And the upper elevations up in upstate New York, as they call it, and when it eventually gets up to Vermont and places like that, they're talking about snow, like accumulations of snow. Yeah, overnight. And overnight is May 1st. It's Friday the 30th. So it's May 1st tomorrow. So midnight, May 1st. So midnight, May 1st is a frost warning. And there's still people out there trying to say like one of the biggest threats is global warming. That and, judging people by, and people who are, they're going after everybody, right? Can't even get into details. You can't talk about it. They're unmentionable things. The unmentionables. We're living in a world gone completely, utterly, totally mad. And for those who are watching this on a television that doesn't give you the description, the title is "A Storm is Coming," and I'm using that in two ways. This weather storm that's coming that has nothing to do with CO2. CO2 greens the planet. It's a beautiful thing. It gives us oxygen. It gives us crops. All right. And that feeds the hungry. But my description below says you got to kind of imagine like a Rod Serling kind of voice, which I used to be able to do, but I don't think I can do. Imagine, if you will. No, that sounds too like weird DJ-ish. Imagine, if you will, a world where practically everything you think you know is wrong, and where you don't know what you don't know. Now you're getting close. I got to add a TING there. Now you're getting close to seeing reality beyond the perception of the glamour, in quotation marks, and misdirection placed before your eyes. And when I talk about the glamour, I'm talking about, if everyone's seen that movie, The Craft, I think they remade it, right? Witchcraft, and they put the glamour on, and then somebody sees a person or perceives the world in a way that's not reality, that way. And so, and also, and that has a lot to do with what we talk about on this channel a lot is consciousness and perception of reality. We'll talk about that maybe in a bit. But this idea of a storm is coming is also double meaning. One, weather is out of whack and has nothing to do with what they call climate change. It has to do with the magnetic field of the earth has weakened. This is a cyclical thing that's going on, a grand solar minimum that it's been acknowledged by even NASA. All right. And the sun's magnetic field has also gotten weaker. Okay. And that keeps cosmic rays out. So it's like the Earth's magnetic field helps protect us from the sun. All right. And the sun's stretches out throughout the solar system and helps protect us all from cosmic rays and other things, right? The whole electromagnetic universe is it almost goes against Einstein physics. In fact, it does, basically. And the more you learn about it, the more you realize Einstein, the patent clerk, didn't know what he was talking about with some of his things, particularly gravity. He also didn't accept a lot of things that now we have found to be true. So, heck with that guy. Everything you know is wrong. You can't really see it totally up there, but let's shine a light on it. Everything you know is wrong. That's a shirt that we have for sale. And recommend you get it. And I also have that you don't know what you don't know shirt. Get this stuff. This is how you mess with people today. See, rioting, protesting, and all these exercises in futility, just don't do it. It's a waste of time, man. They're just gonna haul you up and throw you into some kind of FEMA camp or something. All that stuff they used to talk about, the mad prophets of the airwaves back in the late 90s and the early 2000s. I'm wheezing. Excuse me. For no known reason, maybe because it's 4:59 a.m. and nobody in their right mind should be up here talking, let alone talking fast and trying to do a broadcast worldwide. But all those guys, and they've, it's particularly one or two of them, which everyone knows, who've now been banned, erased, from the public consciousness. But these guys were right about most of the stuff they were talking about. It just took 20 years until people came to the realization that they were onto something. Now, 20 years ago, I was doing a show too. I was doing the same thing. Excuse me. Sorry about that. This would be the polite way of actually clearing your throat or whatever. Personal etiquette, even though it may look weird. And yes, I kind of like chain drink coffee for the first half of the show, trying to get some caffeine in there and also keep the throat lubricated, while I do this thing. But yeah, it's nuts. So I don't know. I don't watch TV. I cut the cord, but I've been watching what's going on, keeping abreast of things. And we are so close to this.
This is Metropolitan Police speaking. Metropolitan Police speaking. All persons are warned to stay off the streets. All persons are warned to stay off the streets.
I mean, they're rounding people up already. And apparently, the speech that was made the other night was basically a warning, a shot before the bow, that they want to round up everybody and that they want to create, and that democracy isn't good enough, so that in order to compete with the authoritarian states like the communist Chinese, that we're going to have an authoritarian state. Build Back Better basically is the motto of the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset, the Davos set. This UN/EU basically takeover of, civilization as we know it, and the former Western civilization. And the funniest thing about it is they're demonizing so-called white people, right? They call them white supremacists or something like that. Basically judging. But the thing is, the people who are in charge of this, they're all white people. And, this is the glamour, right? This is the magician's misdirection that they're putting out there. In other words, these loyal followers, these nincompoops, right, who have no idea what they've bought into, don't see the forest for the trees. And that's why I say everything you know is wrong, and you don't know what you don't know. A bunch of multi-billionaire white people are trying to convince you that white people are bad. Now, like, what the? Every white person. And every white person should get down on their knees and apologize for something that they have no connection to whatsoever. And I've avoided talking about these things because some people think that's political. I don't think it's political anymore, because I don't believe there is a political system. I think there's all just an illusion put before our eyes right now. And that if you give campaign financing, I touched on this yesterday, but yesterday's show was discombobulated, like a lot of my shows, more especially when it gets started. But this one, we're getting into it, fairly quick. I was trying to make this point that your campaign financing I don't care what political party or what cause or belief you have, any of this stuff. See, that stuff doesn't matter to me because that's all just like misdirection and the glamour. All right. It's nonsense. It's bullshit, is what it is, to call it what it really is. Right. And the thing about it is, all you're doing is you're funding the people who want to basically who view you as this, as cattle on their farms that they own. And they have commercials out that say you will own nothing and be happy because you're just cattle on their farms. Everything you know is wrong and you don't know what you don't know. Get the shirts. Think about it. Wear it. Let people look at it and go, duh, what does that mean? All right. The robots, the Walking Dead, the NPCs. All right. Don't donate money to anybody. Anybody. Nothing's going to change in 2022, 2024. Okay. We are already living in a totalitarian state. The Western civilization as we know it has collapsed and is being replaced. That's why they call it the Great Reset. They are changing it to conform to their authoritarian takeover. All right. That's what's going on. It's there for you to see. If you can't see it, you are a fool. Everything they say is hypocritical. They talk about they're going to fix the infrastructure in the US, right? In some grand, unbelievable, multi-billion-dollar project not seen since the mobilization of World War II. And at the same time, they're saying, oh, but we're going to phase out carbon-based fuels and go with this Green New Deal. And I've talked about this many times. I have a show that actually got into it more in depth, a produced show a month or two ago, maybe two. You cannot do that. So they're lying. It's a bold-faced lie, just like Al Gore's movies and climate change and global warming were lies, disproven over the decades. It's cold. It's May 1st. We've got a freeze warning. Guess what? Last year, second week of May, froze. Lost tomato plants. Year before, don't plant before Memorial Day, right? Basically June 1st, they're saying. Come on, what? Spring was March 20th this year. All right? It's like over a month and 10 days ago. We're into May. Like these, the guy in network says, you maniacs. I mean, it's right before your eyes and no one sees it. These little kids, Mommy, the earth is going to turn into a cinder. The teachers told us we need to stop doing this. It's like them telling you need to recycle plastics, and then they pick it up and it ends up getting dumped in the ocean. By who? By the states like California, New York, and New Jersey that are basically what they call blue states, pretending that they're environmentally conscious. They're dumping the plastics. We don't use straws. My question was, well, what's wrong with using a straw? Well, it could get into, or those 6-pack tops. The birds going to kill the birds and get in all these sea creatures. And I'm going, well, who the hell's putting the straws and the 6-pack tops in the ocean? Mr. California? Mr. New York? Who's putting the syringes from hospitals and medical waste in the Atlantic Ocean? Mr. New York and Mr. New Jersey. Governor? These are totalitarian. These are dictators. And the other ones on the other side are just as bad. It's all a game. They all have, it's a big game they're playing with us. But we're beyond the point of where we can laugh about it anymore. you know, or just remove ourselves in the way of saying, well, screw them, they're out of control. This is the kind of stuff that gets them going.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Yeah, they don't like that at all.
Here's what's happening!
You know?
Okay.
So the thing I'm trying to get at is, no, there's nothing we can do about it, you know, in a sense of what's been the practice. There's no elections, all right? Voting is a waste of time, okay? Anyone who votes, don't waste your time. Don't, you know, do something else. Voting day, turn it into a drinking holiday party day or something. All right? You call your boss and say, I'm not coming in today because I'm going to vote, right? Exercise my right to vote. And meanwhile, you know, get yourself some cocktails. Do not donate $1 to any cause whatsoever. I mean, unless it's something like Children's Hospital or something, or somebody like that you know is, you know, helping kids with cancer or something really, really, really honest, you know. And, you know, don't donate to foundations like that like Bill Gates Foundation and stuff like that. They're all just money laundering schemes. That's been proven over and over and over. And campaign financing, the mother lion's share of that, where does it go? To the media. And what has the media done? The media are the ones who destroyed the United States. This is the former United States. I think it's pretty clear after this week that the United States as we know it no longer exists and will not exist. And like, again, like I was trying to claim yesterday, explain to people, they're cementing. It's only like the beginning of 2021, and they're like cementing this together so that it's unchangeable. Elections won't matter. Well, first of all, there are no parties anymore. And people are thinking, yeah, well, we get these rallies and this and such and such. Cult of personality, bullshit. Okay? Bullshit. The world has changed, and you don't know it. You don't know what you don't know. Everything you know is wrong. All right? They're messing with people's minds. Totally messing with people's minds. And they're experts at it. Experts. Right? They've got the best behavioral scientists involved in this. It's called social engineering. They've had this plan in the works for decades. This isn't some new thing. This isn't a left or right issue. Hey, remember, the lockdown happened last year under the last administration. What's going on now is just as bad under this new one. Look, they're two sides of the same counterfeit coin. That's what politicians are. That's what your leaders. Like, what's this leader thing? You know, the cult of personality. Lead me. I need leadership. Who the hell needs leadership? I don't need leadership. Stay away from my place. Keep out of here. I got signs on the door. No trespassing. Right? Trespassers will be shot on sight. Man, it is crazy what's going on out there.
Go ahead and shoot. You'll be doing me a favor.
Yeah, it's nuts, man. But remember,
I am your main connection to the switchboard of souls. I'm the magic man.
Hey, what I'm telling you is the truth, okay? This is the truth. There's no misrepresentation here. I see it. I call it as I see it. And this whole idea back here, I call it eyes without a face. For some reason, we're not seeing an awful lot back there. Maybe because it's 5:13 a.m. in the morning. And there's not a glimmer of light coming from anywhere. I don't know. But let's see. Maybe I shouldn't have this air thing on here. It's my on-air extra reserve thing. The only problem is I have to stand here so that you don't have that light glaring in your face. That's why I like kind of did that. Man, damn it. Great solar stuff. All right. I'm just a guy trying to give you, the straight and narrow story of what's really going on. This no weather radio has been a lifesaver for me the past couple days. And I even used a flashlight today because I got a leaky roof and we've got these like high gusty winds and ridiculous rainstorms. And so not only was I able to listen to it and know what's going on when, because it's just weather radio, but it's got a flashlight in it. You can charge your cell phone with it. It's solar chargeable, crank chargeable, AM, FM radio, and all kinds of other jazz in it. It costs $35 on Tony Caravan Live. Sounds like I'm QVC here, but I'm not. I'm just trying to tell you. I don't know. I think you buy it. I probably might make 40 cents on it. Maybe commission. I don't even know if I will. They're saying to expect power outages. That's why I got this thing here. It works. I'm using it. That's what's powering that bright light there. It's coming out of this thing. See that? That's the plug right there, plugged into it. Power goes out here. I'm going to be okay. I've got beer in the fridge, ice cubes in the freezer, a power pack, a weather radio, flashlights, and I'll just be drinking beer, listening to music, because I'll be powering my system with that. Be like nothing ever happened. That's called being smart preparing, survive and thrive, not, survive. Say survivalist. I don't want a bag of rice in my house, right? I don't want MREs, right? No, I want to live normal. All right. When the fit hits the shan, I want to basically, I want things to be the same. That's what I'm doing. So I got to go late after this show, probably a little bit later when the sun comes up and all that. I got to go out in my garden area because I've got enough lettuce for me to have, sandwiches, salads, and whatever I want all summer long. But there's a freeze warning. You don't put lettuce in a freezer. You put lettuce in a freezer, it just kind of dissolves. So I got to figure some way to cover all of these lettuce plants. Man, am I pissed off about that. And to watch these bastards go on the air and pretend that there's some kind of global warming and just using it and saying we need to phase out of carbon-based fuels at the same time they're trying to do a project that's going to require 4 to 5 times what we even have. Where do they think they're even going to get this stuff? They're up to something. They're up to something. I don't know what they're up to, but they're up to something. That's all I could say. And you've got to stop, believing in the cult of personality. You have to stop because you're funding them. You're funding the media machine, campaign contributions. You're funding these organizations like people on the left. They're just going out and buying $1 million homes. And you're thinking you're supporting some issue or some people who are underprivileged or something. And these people are just living like, throwing parties in their brand new $1 million home. I mean, do you get it? Do you see what's going on? This is like the communist takeover of Russia, but done American style, right? Like in these movies. And it's what was that movie where that guy died? where the two people who worked for him carried him, went to his house. They were carrying him around. Like, what the heck was that movie? I forget. You know what I'm talking about. And that's how this country's being run. They basically have some kind of puppet guy. I don't know what they're giving the dude, right? The placeholder guy. My chair keeps falling down. That's why this weird movement thing. That's what you have when you have a 20-year-old chair. That's what happens. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to get into today. We have to stop supporting these people and stop believing in unrealistic, rhetoric by all these preachers on the airwaves. And I don't mean religious preachers. I mean everybody talking about do this, do that. I'm tired of getting the mail from people asking me for contributions, right? No, they're at the stage where they're basically going to start taking people out. They're just going to be raiding people's homes, denying people this, denying people that. It's insane. It literally is insane. I have to double check my YouTube, make sure everything's going. Your perception is not reality. Okay. Yeah, well, anyway, so let's get into a couple of other weird things that are going on. I touched on these briefly before other shows. Why is the Navy and the government releasing information about UFOs? When for decades and decades and decades, literally almost like 70 years, they've been like pretending it didn't exist. I mean, we know that they did have a thing called Project Blue Book, and they fessed up to that, and that's semi-declassified. So we know that was their first lie. All right. And, then we don't know what this Majestic 12 or whatever that was thing, whether that's true or not. But, considering what's come out recently, they've given the impression that they've been like studying these things and photographing and videotaping these things all along. So they've made people look like fools. Right? But my question is, okay, so they apparently people because the critics used to always say, well, how could they possibly keep a secret for so long? The government's a bunch of inept fools. Right? Well, that's not how the government works. The government's departmentalized, and the government is secrets. I mean, that's basically what the government is. It's one big secretive organization with an agenda that has nothing to do with the political system, the voter system. That's why you never see any of these candidates that run on draining the swamp or anything like that, why the swamp never gets drained. Remember, the last 4 years, the swamp was supposed to be drained. And what did we see? The worst swamp ever. The swamp just grew and got out of control. The swamp just raided an ex-mayor of New York City's house. Okay? So much for that. The swamp was not only drained, it basically was empowered. Okay? They're a whole different animal. And they don't answer to the, political class. They answer to the corporatocracy. The corporatocracy is big tech, all right, who has big data, right? Big pharma, big ag. Since I have all these cuts.
This evening, in the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
That's who runs this country. That's the corporatocracy. They're more interested in getting foreign oil, protecting poppy fields, and the heroin trade. They're an organized crime syndicate. That's what the corporatocracy is. That's who runs Western civilization. That's who runs the EU. The EU is run by an organized crime syndicate. Okay? The United States is run by an organized crime syndicate. And it has been. And all the puppets and all the cult of personality, these figureheads that people vote and rallied behind and came out in numbers unbelievable. Okay? Those people were nothing. They were nobodies. See, a person can be well-intentioned and can be a good man. I'm not criticizing every single person who's entered politics, or their motivations even. What I'm telling you is the system, okay? The system of what we call government doesn't exist. It's an organized crime syndicate. And that the whole electoral process is just basically the glamour. It's misdirection. Okay? Just like with witchcraft and magicians. That's what it is. And this has been going on for centuries. They're like the wizards, the Merlin, myths and things. Okay? That's what this is. Witches and wizards. It's a big game. But it's based in science. The reality is they have techniques they use. It's not magic or witchcraft. It's basically science. There's some thing about that that what seems magical to it's to some at one time is basically science in another time. So to the ancient hominids, fire was like, oh, fire is magic, right? But now people just use a lighter or light a match, and we control fire. Of course, fire still is a weird thing, though, just as an aside. What is it? It is weird. It is kind of magic, but no. They are social engineers, and they're social engineering the world. And this latest speech thing where they're talking about democracy, and the republic, that we move too slow to compete with the authoritarians, is basically saying, well, then we have to put into effect an authoritarian government. And so that's what they're working on now, is to cement that. And once it's cemented, then it's done for good. Doesn't change. Nothing ever changes. Do you ever notice that? Once they pass a law, it kind of sticks forever. So there's not going to be, I mean, I'm kind of interested to see what kind of theatrics they do even in 2022 or 2024 election-wise. Because it'll have to be pure theatrics. Now, of course, that gives them time. They're talking about adding 2 senators to the District of Columbia, which goes against the original idea of having the capital, the nation's capital, independent of any state, right? But that doesn't seem to apply. The First Amendment has been trampled on, doesn't seem to apply anymore. It's being abused, and no one has the balls to challenge it. Supreme Court won't challenge it. Federal courts won't challenge it. Local courts won't challenge it. So, basically the First Amendment begins with Congress shall make no law. And it goes on to say abridging free speech or the, ability to assemble or to redress the government with a grievance in effect. Well, all three of those things are not being followed now. You do not have free speech. If you speak freely, if you criticize something, you're banned. You don't have the freedom to assembly. They locked us down last year. Went right against the First Amendment rights. And though it was challenged, no one, some little area here, some people were allowed to go to church. Then they said they couldn't go to church, or people weren't still allowed to go to funerals. They couldn't visit their elderly parents in nursing homes. They couldn't say goodbye to family members dying, let alone get married, So freedom of assembly, what are you talking about? Ice cubes in my thing. And redress the older words, redress the government, with grievances. It's like when all these grievances were put in last year, the Supreme Court and the higher courts basically said we're not going to hear those cases. So the First Amendment was completely violated over the last couple of years. And this applies to social media, obviously, too, which is like the biggest violator of the First Amendment. Because remember, it begins with Congress shall pass no law. So this alleged Section 230 protection or whatever they talk about, well, it's null and void. The First Amendment says Congress shall pass no law, so you can't make a Section 230 or do something, right? The only way to get around an amendment to the Constitution, I showed this the other day, it's like prohibition, is that you have to actually pass another amendment repealing it. So they had an amendment that said prohibition, where they outlawed alcohol, and it was Al Capone, Chicago, bang, bang, shoot 'em up, right? And then a couple amendments later, because in between that, they had like women's suffrage or something like that. They had to make another amendment to the Constitution that was the repeal of prohibition. So no one repealed the First Amendment. So social media is in direct violation of the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights. So do you understand? They've cemented, they're openly defiant. And yet people are giving money to campaigns so that because they're following a cult of personality of someone promising to so-called drain the swamp and fix things. But all that money, those billions of dollars or multi-millions of dollars that go into these campaign coffers, that goes mostly to the media. And the media are the ones that allowed all of this stuff to happen and basically promoted it. They're propagandists. They're the propaganda wing of the corporatocracy. What is the corporatocracy? I listed it before. It's big tech, big pharma, big ag, right? Big data, the military contractors, the central banking system, the global government, the World Economic Forum. It's basically an organized crime syndicate that's ruling the world. You get that into your head. That's not like fantasy. That's the reality. It's an organized crime syndicate that works in unison. And it has all sorts of lieutenants and different people at various levels. But those that you see in public, the political figures, they're stooges. They're stooges. They're powerless stooges. Even though somebody right now is taking offense. Well, my candidate is a nice guy and I believe in him and he. No, I'm not saying that every single politician is bad. I've known politicians personally, literally personally. I worked on a congressional campaign. I knew, guy was in my office, a nationally known guy, congressman. All right. I've worked on other campaigns, and I've known even other Congress people. And the point is, they were good men, good people, well-intentioned. But the fact is, the system is the system. And sometimes the further back in time you go, they were able to get certain things passed. But we've reached a point now where it's the move to authoritarian total takeover. They're going to add 2 senators to the District of Columbia, maybe Puerto Rico. They want to basically do what Roosevelt tried to do but didn't get away with. They want to add more seats in the Supreme Court so that they can fix that court. And whether or not they do that or not, if they do it, that's the, that's the end all. But I don't think they're going to do all of that stuff necessarily, or that they have to. Sorry, my shoe just came off. Sorry about that. And I'm drinking my iced coffee at a record pace. I'm going to end up getting wired. Took 2 Tylenol to keep the mouth thing down. You can't see a dentist these days because the last time I saw a dentist a year ago, because I've been having problems on this side. Just old fillings from a psychotic dentist when I was a kid who put all these metal fillings in. I showed these once before. Let me dig one out, see if you could see it in my hand. I have a couple of these things. Let's see if you can see that. You see that? There. It's not, I don't know. The lighting in this place is so freaking bizarre. There. See that? That's pretty big. That's like a rock. It's a piece of metal. This came out of my mouth. I've got like a couple pieces like that. Every time I used to go, I was talking to my mother about this on the phone, my 87-year-old mother, about this dentist we had as a kid. She said, yeah, that guy was no good. I'm like, why'd you keep sending us there? It's like every time you went, he was giving you a filling. And I didn't grow up in some house where we were like eating sugar every day or anything weird like that, or had like 10 boxes of cereal and stuff like that. My mom was like more of like, straight. It was like meat and potatoes and pasta and, or stuff like that. Veal or whatever, scalloped potatoes. Did you ever have scalloped potatoes? I mean, there's certain things she used to make. But no, we didn't have a lot of junk like the neighbors had, all these Fruit Loopy things and all this crazy stuff. So it's like there was no reason. I wasn't eating candy bars. I didn't grow up in a place where I had a lot of cash, so I was going out with money to buy things. Excuse me. I didn't have money till I got a job at age 16. Then I had money. We didn't get allowances in those days. But yeah, so I went to a dentist already. I actually had a tooth removed because had to go to an oral surgeon. I told this story before, but I have to keep telling it to show you how messed up things are and imagine how worse it's going to get. So I had to go to an oral surgeon, made me get a test for the plague, came out negative. The test says SARS-2, by the way. That's what this is. Okay, for those who don't know it, it's SARS-2. It's like SARS-1. It's just SARS-2. It's SARS. That's what it says right on the test. I've already brought it out once before. I'm not going to bring it out again. You know that. Do the research. Then I go to the place, he yanks the tooth. But before that, I tried to go to a dentist that was nearby. In fact, just several blocks from me. I could have walked to the place. We're not taking any new patients, which basically mean they didn't want to see anybody at all. So this is what we're heading into. Gas prices are going up. Food prices are through the freaking roof, right? Anybody who's trying, like me, I have a little workshop at the end of my yard, my garden, because that's my thing. I'm into that stuff. You know, I'm into doing things. Well, lumber, forget it. You know, I was watching some guy just the other day was talking about it, where he paid $8 for some particle board, a sheet of particle board. It was like $8 or something like that a year ago or so. And now they wanted $40 for like a 4x8 sheet. You know, so he's going, even if you paid $10, you know, how do you increase the price of something by 10, by 4 times the price? So home building, you know, they're saying the prices of houses now. Of course, I don't know why anybody would build a new house. There are so many houses. Like I bought my house for next to nothing. I say this all the time and I repeat it all the time. My taxes, mortgage, and insurance are less than $200 a month. And there's houses available on this block where I live. Could walk to a grocery store. There's 2 restaurants down the street, closer than the grocery store. Grocery stores, like it's just like a mile round trip walk. It's like a half mile. It's nothing, right? People who are into steps, it's like it's 2,000. It's only 2,000 steps. There's a couple bars in town. There's a bar up the street. It's not only several blocks up there. Convenience store, you know, and then turn the corner, and there's I don't know. There's other stuff up there. I don't know. Tattoo shop, another Irish pub, you know, corner store like you see in the old days, you know, mom pop corner store, makes subs and deli and, you know, has the basics. And that's the neighborhood I live. Oh, and next to me is a doctor. That's where I go. That's my family doctor. Literally next door. And my taxes, mortgage, insurance across the street is it's like a plumbing and paint supply store. It's not like a full-fledged hardware store, but you could buy paint and some things like that. And they have they're the people I've had redo some of my plumbing here when I first bought the house. That's across the street. So it's that kind of street. And, you know, so it's there's some traffic on the street and there's some, you know, this isn't exactly up what you would call a upper class neighborhood, you know, this is diversity. Okay. I'm fine with that. I don't care. People don't seem to bother me and I don't bother anybody else because I don't care about that stuff. You know, I say I'm non-political and I don't get caught up in issues and ideology stuff. Leave me alone. I'll leave you alone. That kind of thing. Live and let live. But taxes, mortgage, insurance, $200 a month. You know. So you can imagine how cheap. My house cost less than $20,000. It was like $15,000, $16,000 mortgage. That's why the mortgage is so cheap. But that, you know, taxes are cheap too. And, you know, the insurance isn't that high. I have kind of a roofing problem, but I've got this full attic up there that I basically am going to, I'm going to turn it into a second roof. You know, because the hell if I'm going to spend $20,000 or $12,000 on a new roof. So I just put down some plastic today because there was a little bit of a leak last night in my hallway. But I put the plastic down up in the attic because at one time, this is a 100-year-old house. And so I think the first person to buy this actually must have had a big family and used the attic, finished it off, and used it as like a bedroom, maybe a kid's bedroom or something. But then the last guy didn't, because the last guy where I'm sitting right now was a barber shop. And he lived upstairs, and this was a barber shop. That's pretty crazy. Oh, you're that guy who bought the barber shop. Yeah, that's me. Give me a 6-pack to go. But I could live like that, and I could live here, and I could do that because I'm free, and hopefully they don't encroach on this neighborhood, right? Leave us alone. That's what I'm saying. I feel sorry for people living in the big population centers. I turned on the shortwave radio last night because yesterday I charged all my things, and I have a shortwave radio, like a little shortwave radio that's chargeable. Everything's chargeable now. It's all like USB stuff. You notice that everything's like USB. This thing even has 2 USB outlets on it. So I figured, well, if we're in this storm situation, I'm sorry, I got to clear my throat like big time. It's just weird. I guess it's a lot of words. I've been talking nonstop for an hour. And thanks for sticking along with me. Sorry I don't have any chat or any comments enabled and stuff. I've been having trouble with that to begin with. They're messing with me. I don't care. They don't want the truth out there. They don't like guys like me. And then they throttle me. But let them play their game. I'll post this thing around various different social media plays. Well, anyways, listening to I put on a shortwave radio. A lot of people don't even know shortwave is still out there. There's still these people on shortwave radio because that's like the last freedom that you have. Because not even the FCC, I think, if you're on some shortwave radio now is like they beam this up from a satellite, and then through these transmitters or something like that. Somehow they get around it. So these guys could say whatever the heck they want to, and there's nobody bothering them. And so this guy was talking about population. It was interesting because it was almost like a lot of the stuff I've been saying, because he almost touched on the CO2 thing, but I don't think he completely got. A lot of people don't really understand this. A lot of people are still convinced, sensible people are convinced that there's something called climate change happening in this country. And in this world, on this planet. And to me, that's like mind-boggling. That's like really totally like mind-boggling. Because I know that it's not, right? I watched the Al Gore movies, I was a true believer there for a while. About 15 years ago, something like that, even 10 years ago, I was still I might have been even still into it. Let's see, 10, no, about 15 years ago, close to 15 years ago, maybe. But, then I did my research and I found out that they were full of crap. That's not, there was no global warming. The temperatures the planet's been cooling. And it's been cooling consistently. It's just that they basically had some agenda and they took a couple of key years during a solar maximum. Because every 11 years, the sun has this cycle, okay, where it has a lot of sunspots. That's called a solar maximum. They don't teach this in school. I don't know why, because I guess they were planning, because all these things that are being implemented, none of this stuff is new. It's like even when they had the Patriot Act, they just took that off the shelf when 9/11 happened, right? They're opportunists. What that one guy said, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? So it's not so much whether or not these people are involved in the actual event itself. I scared somebody away when I start talking about climate change. So I could see people that come on and come off. It's like the idea is that they have these things already planned out. Patriot Act was planned well before, in the early 90s, maybe even before, under HGW, or the first Bush, the old man Bush. The guy was the CIA guy who what's his name? Who was the head of the DOJ under the last administration? Barr. Well, Barr was, was his man, right? And was an old CIA guy too. So how do you drain the swamp when you put Barr in charge of it? And I used to, that's when I was active politically. I was doing the Twitter thing and stuff. I don't do it anymore because once I started seeing some of these things, I'm going, man, this is like surreal. It's frickin' surreal. Well, anyway, at least this guy touched on the one thing. Look, CO2 greens the planet. All right. This planet is green. All right. CO2 is why they call it a greenhouse gas, because they pump it into greenhouses because it helps the greenhouse produce more. All right. More food. So the more CO2, the more green the planet is, the more oxygen is released by those plants and trees and everything. And the more food that's generated to feed people. Okay. So it's a good thing. And 0.004%, we could go higher than that. So everything they've been telling you, like I say, everything you know is wrong. And then there apparently, because like I say, I cut the cord with TV. So I don't sit there. I'm not a news junkie. I'm not a junkie. I don't get dopamine hits from social media, and I'm not a junkie. People are proud to say, hey, I'm a news junkie. Yeah, well, good. That's like, you're proud that you're like a heroin addict too? You freak of nature, right? I'm a news junkie. Get lost, man. Get lost. So I keep aware of things because everything's in your face. You can't help it. You don't need to watch TV to know what's going on today. So apparently there's people talking about like fresh water shortages, all this fear mongering they're doing with people. It's all this stuff.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Yeah. Well, we're beyond that point because it's fear mongering gone crazy. And this guy was like just reiterating the fact that we all know and did learn when we were in school that 2/3 of the earth is water. There's aquifers underneath most of the continents. The middle of the United States, there's some like huge aquifer. It's like unbelievable amount of fresh water. We have desalination processes and different things like that, but we don't need even to tap the oceans. For water. There's plenty of fresh water. It rains all the time. That's natural desalination. I collect rainwater in my backyard. And I could put in my area, and this isn't the rainforest, or this isn't like we don't have monsoons, right? This is the mid-Atlantic former United States. If I had huge water containers out there, because all I have like a 30-gallon, and then I've got like a 5-gallon, and I use it mainly for water to water my garden and just like to wash my hands and stuff when I'm out there, so I don't have to I have a hose to water. I water the plants with a lot, especially things like my tomatoes and different things like that. But for the most part, I just use rainwater, captured rainwater, and those things are filled to the brim. So that's all fresh. That's the freshest waters you could get. So there's no water shortage. So whoever's pushing that one out, this guy was trying to debunk it, and I go, you didn't have to debunk it. That's the fact. And then the other one was this overpopulation thing, where Bill Gates wants the world population. It's close to 8 billion now. He It wants the world population to be reduced to 400 million or something. I mean, that would basically be an extinction level event. And this guy, what was interesting, this was the shortwave radio broadcast I was listening to. I have no idea where it was coming from. Shortwave radio, right? And he was making the point, and it's a good point, and I've made this point myself because I've traveled so many places, that when you travel, when you drive, like I've driven across this country, I've been in most of the United States, former United States. And when you're on the road and you're going from the East Coast to the West, or North to South, the majority of times, apart from some road traffic as you get close to metropolitan areas, where it gets like congested and stuff. But most of it's just abandoned. You don't see anything. You just see open land, or forests, green hills. And so overpopulation, what overpopulation? And this guy was trying to say it's like 95% of the people, they're all like crushed into these cities, the big population centers. But this planet's got plenty of room. I mean, except for places like, even China has a lot of extra space, even though they've got 1.5 billion people. Now, places like India are pretty crowded. That place is crowded. They've got problems. That country's got problems. And for being a semi-democracy, country, it's a pity there's not more focus on helping that country out, as opposed to or at least a focus on that country instead of a focus on places like the Middle East that are out of control and have been out of control forever, and China and Russia, obsession with Russia and all that. But that, I deviate from the point. The idea is that we don't have a water shortage. We don't have global warming. We don't have a overpopulation problem. All right. We don't have a white supremacy problem. White supremacy. What are they talking about? Like, what are they talking about? I mean, I don't know. I mean, what? There's a couple thousand people maybe in the United States that might have, a couple clubs they might have somewhere. I don't never seen any, and I've traveled all over the place. And I grew up in a time where, like I say, I live in a neighborhood. It's a totally integrated neighborhood. Everywhere I go, all I see is women pushing, babies, that is like the product of interracial couples and things. Turn on your TV, every show, right? Every movie, every show is completely, integrated and even weighted towards what they call people of color. So every one of these things, like I say, everything is wrong. It's like there is no racial problem divide. We've been long over that. The civil rights movement ended, like 40 to 50 years ago. The feminist movement ended 40 to 50 years ago, right? That was over. All right. There's no global warming. You could go back to the 70s Time magazine, and they were predicting, they had a picture. I say this before, and I've posted it already. A picture of Archie Bunker on the cover of Time magazine in like freezing in a winter coat. And the thing is the earth freezing? Are we entering a new ice age or something like that? Which they were right, because that's where we're headed. And, so there's no water shortage. We're not overpopulated. And that's why I was getting into this idea of lumber, because that's how I got on this tangent. People building houses, keep new housing starts. They talk about the economy. If you watch the financial people, new housing starts are up, or this is a gauge in the economy. We don't need to build a single home in this country. We don't need to build a single home in this country. There are so many empty apartment buildings, luxury apartment buildings. There are almost complete neighborhoods that are unoccupied. There are the places like I have where the taxes are cheap and the houses may be a few years older than most, but you know, talk about a fixer-upper. You don't have to demolish it to fix it up. You basically need a couple cans of paint, some mud, right? And maybe fix peel off some wallpaper, and either sand it down or rip something out and put a new sheet of drywall in here or there, and maybe buy one or two overpriced sheets of plywood or something like that. That's a fact. What people, what do people want to, live in some development, right? In some rectangular cookie cutter home? It's crazy. When I see people paying $1.5 million for a home, forget about these, elitists that buy $22 million homes. Forget all that. That's so over the top that it's ridiculous. And then they end up broke, like 10 years later anyway, because, they think they're going to be a rap star forever, right? No, it doesn't last that long. You get old and then people get tired of looking at you, and your songs are so repetitive. People go, they don't want to hear it on the radio. Besides, we're due for a change. I haven't talked about this in a while. I'll try to go fast with it. But, music is messed up right now. It's been messed up for like over 20, 25 years. See, if you think about the 1940s, okay, let's just go through this. You had the crooners, what they called the crooners. Bing Crosby, I am dreaming of a white Christmas, right? Rosemary Clooney, Then you had the 50s come along, and you got Les Paul was starting to play his guitar, electric guitar, and the big bands were in the 30s and the 40s, but the big bands were starting to swing it up a little bit more, rock and rolling it type of like, which basically started, and that's how let's just pick it up in the 50s, right? So you had the big bands starting to get a little more, swinging almost to rocking, right? Swinging to rocking type of thing. And adding guitars with like Les Paul. And then you got Elvis Presley coming along, right? What was Bill Haley and the Comets? It was a big band. Let's shake, rattle, and roll. Rock around the clock, rock around the clock. That was Bill Haley and the Comets, right? And that was the 50s. And then by the end, you had Elvis and stuff. And so it was, excuse me, it was rock and roll, was born. So in the 50s, you go from the 40s into the 50s, you go from these crooners, singers, Sinatra was still around and some of those guys, But I mean, it was like crooners, big band, swing, into rock and roll. See, within a single decade, you were changing from like, a big band to rock and roll. And then the 60s come along, and even the late 50s, like all these things, you can't define specific years, but you could kind of, circa is the word they use, is the best way to say approximately when a thing happened. And then you had like the early folk singers, right? That was right around, and the beat poets. I'm a 21st century beat poet. I have 50 songs out, okay, that are beat poetry, right? And 10 books in case you had never watched a show before. But they basically, and that's how Dylan, was started. He was a folk singer, but all those folk singers. And Dylan eventually electrified, which pissed off all the folk singers. But then you had the British invasion, and you had that 60s sound, right? And so it was the Beatles, the Stones. But at the same time, then you had heavy metal. It was starting to come in. But then you had Woodstock, right? And you had Jimi Hendrix, and it was hard rock, the Jefferson Airplane. And that was the beginning of that, real electric with lead guitars and stuff, right? And then you get into the 70s, and so you get all these bands like, Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath, right? That kind of thing, Steppenwolf. And then, so think about it. So in the 60s, you're going from like folk to the British invasion to Woodstock, Hendrix, and the beginnings of harder rock, guitar rock. And then in the 70s, you've got hard rock and, and guitar rock. And then that phased into R&B, classic R&B, what you see is what you get, that kind of thing. Get all aboard the love train, right? I mean, that was the big music by the mid 70s, and pop music. And of course, country music was all going through there at the same time, but that was going through its phases, from Hank Williams and the real crooning type of country singers to where they were becoming more popish. By the end of the 70s, you were getting into disco. Okay. Then you get into the 80s, and then it was like backlash against disco, like disco sucks stickers you'd see on cars. Pardon me. Just trust me, it's hard to talk fast. It's like I do these shows, they're 2 hours long. And if I didn't talk this fast, it would be like they'd be 4 hours long. But that's murder on your throat at 6 o'clock in the morning. So then you had punk rock, right? Which was like a pushback to disco, punk. And then and so then you had hair metal. And, we're in the 80s now. So you got punk, right? You got MTV came along. So you still had pop. Then it was hair metal. And then by the end of the 80s, right, it was the Seattle sound started, that would become alternative. And that like worked its way into the early 90s, right? What they called alternative music was basically that. And all along that, there was still, rap was starting to come in and dance music was starting to come in, right? And remember, while this was all happening, you still had jazz and blues, that were still existed and was transitioning through there. And then somewhere around the mid 90s or so, excuse me. Yeah, I'm sorry. I very apologize for that, but it's nothing I could do. It's either not broadcast, But somewhere in the mid to end of the 90s, then you suddenly had this rap type of thing take over, like these 16. This is, you could like research this. I don't know if it's 16 or 12 or whatever it is. But you had like 16 songwriter / producers that were writing every song. And every song basically sounded the same because they were all produced by the same producers and songwriters. And these guys became like ridiculously rich. And if you think about it, it's not as if you didn't have like an alternative band pop out or some rock band come out, right? Or something like that. But what I'm talking about is what was pop, what was mainstream, what was at the top of the pops, so to speak. All right. And so for the past 20 years, what's been at the top of the pop? Basically, like the same 16 rap songs. And so what, like guys who were rockers became country, and then country started adding, the same producers were producing it. So the country songs were starting to sound like almost rap songs or dance songs, right? But it's basically blended into like 20 years of stagnation. But previously to that, within any given decade, you might have 3 distinct musics that would be on your top. We're talking about the top 40, top 10. You turn on any radio station in America and you would hear Elvis Presley in the late 50s, early 60s. In the mid 60s, you turn any radio station on in America and you'd hear a Beatles song or a Stone song. Right? In the 70s, if it was an FM, when FM started to take over, you'd hear like, Ozzy or Steppenwolf or, a lot of bands like that. Or by the mid 70s, you turn on these stations, you'd hear some of these classic rock, Marvin Gaye, and these kinds of songs, right? You turn on stations in the big cities and you hear disco, right? You turn on other college stations, you'd hear punk rock, ska, right? When MTV came along and it was like hair metal and pop music and flashy crap, right? And in the late 80s and 90s, you turn on any station in any city and you'd hear, Seattle sound, alternative music. That's what I'm talking about. But now you turn on any stations, it's the same old crap. Unless you have some kind of overpriced satellite radio or you go, your own music collection. I got 10,000 songs. I've been everything. I've been every role in a radio station, from DJ to general manager. So I have everything. That's why I've got an on-air light from the last radio station I was a manager of. Remodeled the place. Had an extra light. So stagnation. And so that's something that, so pop, and that's how pop culture, politics took over as pop culture. And everything else just became, was stagnated. And remember when pop music died, like if you think of the songs today, and this is a weird thing with people, the songs all along, usually pop music. And when I say pop music, I don't necessarily mean like, stupid pop music. There's plenty of that goofy stuff. No, I'm talking about what was a pop. There was a lot of good songs that were like the number one hit in the country. Right. And so the thing is, but they were, depending on the times, they were like love songs, or they were songs about life, living, and they were like positive and happiness, or it was about, somebody broke up with somebody else or something like that. But, they were meaningful songs that like, had emotion to them and stuff. They weren't like, boom, 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 boom. I'm going to sex you, boom, 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 shake your boom, boom, boom. Right? Or, get that cop and blah, 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 blah. Right? Yeah, what? What am I supposed to get out of that? Right? Oh, I know what I'm supposed to get out of this. Right.
Did you accidentally inject yourself with some kind of psychotropic agent?
Screw that. It's like it's out of control. So people don't really get it. They don't see what's going on. They miss the whole, they missed the whole transition from when the world was taken over by Western civilization was taken over by an organized crime syndicate. And then they voted and gave all their hard-earned money, or even donated $5 or a couple of bucks to these various campaigns. But in the aggregate, it all amounted to this like mega hundreds of millions of dollars or more that went to the media for campaign advertising and billboards and radio ads and all that kind of stuff. And so you funded the very people who were basically looking the other way while the organized crime syndicate was seizing control of the country and Western civilization as a whole. This isn't just the US, it's the UK, it's Canada, it's Australia, it's a lot of the European countries, the EU has just been at it earlier. It happened there, a lot earlier. Brussels was the worst thing that ever happened if you were a European. That was the beginning of that was the continuation of Hitler's Greater Germany. That's what the EU is. You can look at documents. That was his plan. That was his plan. So basically, Hitler's plan succeeded, created a greater Germany. It was called the EU. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people just don't, like I say, everything you know is wrong and you don't know what you don't know. Think about it. Get the shirts, man. I'm selling them. TonyCaravanLive.com. Go there. Get some great solar stuff because there's some crazy stuff coming down the pike. They want to make this thing. I call it eyes without a face, right? Which is when you walk outside and you see people, right? It's basically you see eyes without a face. Like the Billy Idol song. They want to keep this thing forever, man. Forever. Endless. I heard a discussion by some doctor who was actually kind of debunking a lot of the nonsense that went on, but he was still saying, yeah, this is a thing and it's going to probably, if you've got this, you still are going to need to, wear this, the unspeakable things. Like as I say, what First Amendment? Anyone who wants to argue with me about that, I'm saying you have no grounds for argument. The fact is, if I speak the unspeakable, this channel goes off the air. Right? And if I would speak the unspeakable at the workplace or something like that, I'd be fired. And then unemployable. Why were you fired from your last job? Right? And if it's on some kind of record or they call for a reference and they say, oh, he spoke the unspeakable. They say, sorry, we can't hire you. You spoke the unspeakable. So the proof is there. It's right before your eyes. Like I say, it's the glamour. It's misdirection. It's like witchcraft and whatever. And the funniest thing about that is in the old Middle Ages and stuff, the black mirror, you see how that's reflecting? All right. The black mirror, that was what they used to call the witchcraft. Yeah. This cast a spell. Yeah. The black mirror. And this thing came along. It didn't even exist 15 years ago. Right? And now it's the center of everyone's life. Isn't that something? How is that possible? How is that possible? How is that possible? Right? Now, granted, if you were born in the year 2000 and you're 21, you don't, this was your life. So you go like, I don't know what that guy's talking about, No, anybody over the age of 21, 25 or 30, or in their late 30s or 40s or older, they all know a world in which social media didn't exist and that black mirror, me precious, oh, don't take away me precious, me apps and everything. Yeah, right. Screw that. Life was just fine without it. I canceled my cellular service. I have a smartphone, but I just use it to take pictures. And I have an app, like I've said 1,000 times. I'll say it again. I just got one of those Magic Jack things, $40 a year. I can make phone call. I have a phone in my house, $40 a year. That's my phone, not monthly. And it comes with an app that I could put on my old smartphone that I used to have a cellular service with. And I get, I can make phone calls, receive phone calls, do whatever I want to. Texts. I don't use text because I think that's goofy. I don't like thumbing something. It's too small. It's a tool to me. I use it as a tool. That's it. And it's a decent camera. And I made videos. I made a video of my garden that's on, my YouTube channel is
Rock Flux Live.
Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
Well, let's hear it.
Insert your station call letters here. Here we go.
I gotta go.
You're clear to go. Hey, don't think this sounds really cool. Let's roll. Go.
The only station that matters.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
Yeah, I'm an old radio guy, so I got all this nonsense. And a buddy of mine makes a lot of stuff too. And, you know, so we got everything.
Okay.
So I'm just going to do these shows. I've been doing these like nonstop for the last, 80 days, every morning, 7 days a week. It's insane, isn't it? I have over 200 videos on YouTube, and I don't get a lot of viewers. Some of my old stuff got in the hundreds. I have a couple of older videos that got like 1,000, a couple thousand views or something when I used to do expedition stuff. But that stuff is like nonsense and it's ancient. So I'm just going to keep pushing this issue with people about this organized crime syndicate that's taken over and has created this authoritarian state, and that people need to stop supporting any political candidate whatsoever or any cause whatsoever, unless it's like helping some kid with cancer or some, something that goes directly to help an individual, say a disabled veteran or something like that. That's it. Anything beyond that is, you're supporting the organized crime syndicate and the people that are protecting them, the propagandists. It's the same with the education system. People go on maternity leave and then they put their kids in and let them be raised by the state. It's called the nanny state. All right. So from infancy through, straight on through college. Indoctrination, conditioning, and propaganda. And so Generation Now, right? Apart from the free thinkers, there's certain people that are immune. Because I was like that when I was younger. I was like, a lot of people were just going with the flow, and I was like looking around and I was questioning stuff. I'm immune to their propaganda and their stuff. It just doesn't, it doesn't do anything for me, and I just, but yeah, there's people out there that are immune to it. But the problem is they're few and far between. I remember when I was in school, there was a handful of people like me that were immune to it. Everybody else was like just going with the flow, believing what they heard. And so there's no hope, when you have a generation or two that has been indoctrinated, conditioned, and is being propagandized daily, and who's addicted, to the witchcraft of the black mirror and misdirection of this geoengineering, social engineering magic, misdirection. What are you going to do? They have cognitive dissonance. They've got a lifetime of where they were conditioned to something. And you're saying, hey, don't donate to that political campaign because you're just supporting an organized crime syndicate that's that's responsible for the takedown of Western civilization and has destroyed the United States. This is the former United States. You say that to somebody and they look at you like, you're wacky, right?
I think all three of yous popped your stoppers.
And that's just the way it is. Get the tinfoil hat out, man. Organized crime syndicate. What are you talking about? Hey, what do you do in that environment? You don't do anything. You don't do anything. You got to look out for yourself and find community, and if you can't find community, you just got to fucking build a life for yourself. and be happy. Thrive and survive is what I say, or survive and thrive. It's not enough to survive. You got to thrive. You got to keep things going. Live cheap like I do, right? But live well. I don't deprive myself of anything, but I'm living below the poverty line intentionally because my mortgage, taxes, and insurance are less than $200. Is that what's your rent or what's your mortgage payment and taxes and insurance? You see? So it's like you get down to a certain level and you're off the grid. You don't have to file income taxes. All right. And so that's the way to, you just got to free yourself of these crazy people. Now, future generations, and my viewpoint on this is, and I'm going to get into this, and I alluded to this yesterday. It's about catastrophism. There's a lot of people talking. I'll just get into this in the last few minutes here or so, 20 minutes maybe. But go that long. It takes that long. In my book, Codex, which it's hard to see here. That's right. Everything's backwards. See, I see the mirror opposite because YouTube has like a crappy interface. I refer to a Earth catastrophe cycles. I'm going to read you a little bit of this book. It's, since nobody's buying it, Codex. All right. The hard problem of consciousness and other stuff and the flow of consciousness. Earth catastrophe cycles. This is my book, my, latest one. I'll have a new one coming out later this year. Earth catastrophe cycles. The world as we know it may come to a violent end in the year 2046. Okay. So you've got 25 years, basically. It's common knowledge among archaeologists that the Earth experienced a major cataclysm approximately 12,000 years ago. This may well coincide with the numerous great deluge stories found in traditions throughout the world, including the most popular Noah's flood. We also know that there were civilizations that existed before this, as uncovered in the buried ruins like Göbekli Tepe, or underwater cities found off the coast in many parts of the world. Some believe the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid to also be from that, in quotation marks, before time. Worldwide ocean levels rose as much as 400 feet after that event. We know that animals such as woolly mammoths, short-faced bears, saber-toothed cats, and many others, particularly in northern regions, became extinct 1,000 years later, which is referred to as the Younger Dryas period, when global cooling occurred about 10,900 BC. There are several theories that the cause of this was from a large asteroid impact to the cyclical climate change that shut off the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, or what I call the conveyor, and caused a fast freeze. For example, woolly mammoths have been found with undigested plants in their stomach. Okay. Now I go on to talk about this, and there was even this, and there was even this thing called the Adam and Eve story, and it's not the biblical story. And I listed here, you can see, you see how there's like I've included this thing. Now, I don't know if I can get this on there, but that's an excerpt. That's a page, a declassified page from the CIA, CIA.gov. Okay. And you could, I believe you can still go there and find on the CIA.gov website a PDF file of the Adam and Eve story. Now, this Adam and Eve story, isn't it like the Adam and Eve story you're thinking about? It's a story about this Earth catastrophe. The CIA classified that for like 50 years or something like that, 40 or 50 years. Now, why would the CIA classify this story that talked about an Earth catastrophe, the sun having some kind of, nova, what they call a micronova, ejecting particles towards the Earth and basically leading to a near extinction event? And very few people survived. Those that survived, and that's why we think civilization began, say, 12,000 years ago. But the survivors, everything was destroyed. The side of the Earth that what happens is, this is the ongoing theory. The Earth's when this ejection comes at us, the Earth actually stops in its rotation. Okay. Now, imagine if you had a tray of water on your car and you're just driving along the road and then you just stop suddenly. What's going to happen to that water in that tray? It's going to... Okay, so when the Earth stops suddenly, the Pacific Ocean rolls over, all right, the North American continent and South America. The Atlantic Ocean rolls over European and Africa, right, and into China, India. And we're not talking like a tsunami. We're talking like 1,000 feet high. We're talking about an ocean, all right, scouring, right? That's one explanation. And the side that faces that, while the duration of this just stops the Earth for about 8 hours, just gets totally like burnt to a crisp. All right. And the other side freezes. All right. And then there's this equilibrium, because then the Earth starts spinning in the opposite direction. And then there's an equilibrium because the atmosphere is, the atmosphere is completely removed. So the rest of this atmosphere tries to fill in this gap. You've got this dust cloud of debris, so to speak, that's come in. And it's just, and the Earth, and you just get this frozen planet, flash frozen. Perhaps they say so many degrees, maybe up to 15 degrees along the equatorial region, people may survive. That's why it's so ridiculous. Like these people, the immigrants coming from the South to the U.S., they have no idea, man. This is not the place to be. And it's the same with these people building underground shelters. This is archaeology. New York, Pennsylvania, all these places, forget about Canada and places like that. There was like a mile of ice over top of the land masses in North America. A mile, right? You got an underground shelter, you try digging through a mile or two of ice. And, and it's like with glaciers, when they move, they just, scrape and bring the rocks along. And literally it's like a Brillo pad. Any traces of civilization are gone. And we're talking 12,000 year cycle. This seems to occur. And people think, well, there must be remnants of different things. Yeah, they find things like the Antikytherian device. They found in rocks. They found hammers in rocks, like things that look like spark plugs, like fossilized inside of things. And the Russians have found a lot of stuff. But, it might be one of the reasons why they hate, demonize Russia, because Russia was the first ones to basically, when the USSR broke up, Russia was open about its UFO, stories, and it was talking about all this kind of stuff, things they found, from previous civilizations. So it's like you got to demonize them, because if the societies were open to one another, this stuff might, the CIA, this idea of hiding stuff. Why would you hide and classify a story that sounds so far out? Look, I'm telling you right now, this sounds crazy. In other words, we're talking about, and it's not a specific, remember, we're on this rock that's being dragged by our sun, our star, through, our galaxy at ridiculous speeds, right? It's not like some stupid thing you see in school where you see here's the sun and the planets, that's not how it is. It's more like the sun's up here and we're kind of here, and it's like, and the whole thing's hurling through space at a ridiculous speed, and the galaxies are moving. It's not stationary as we think it is. Everything is weird. It's like clockwork. It's like, the reasons people say they don't understand, well, if the earth is spinning so fast, how come we can't feel it? Well, what happens is you have to understand and I'm just going to give you this in a basic, this is approximation to explain something. Imagine the earth, the circumference of the earth being like 24. I want to give you a couple of facts, but I don't want to get into this. Okay. Earth circumference 24,000 miles. Okay. But that varies because we're in this oblate spheroid. So it's approximately 24,000 miles. So you take 24. So isn't that interesting? We have 24 hours in a day. All right. Junk mail just pops up. Sorry. So people say, well, if we're spinning so fast, right? So that would be another thing new. How fast does the earth spin? 67,000 miles per hour. So people say, well, if the earth is spinning at 67,000 miles per hour, how are we not just like flinging her off? Or why aren't we look like those people in those, astronaut test things, or, where your face is like pulled back or something like that? 67,000 miles per hour. All right. Well, you have to see that if the circumference is 24,000 miles, and think of the clock, right? 24 hours. All right. And so what happens is, if you do the math, and like I say, I'm running out of time here, but you could, I actually did a video on this once where I tried to explain it. It's like when the earth is that big, moving at such and such a speed, with the coincidence of the 24,000 miles, basically to us, it appears like a minute hand on a clock. So if you have an old analog clock and you look at a minute hand, all right, not the second hand, that's the thing that, on your watch or something, you'll see that move. It's the minute hand, like I've got the old fake Apple Watch here. Let's see if it's still charged. Yeah. Watch this. Let me get to sort of show you this, just to explain this. Okay. I don't know if I put it in closer or farther, whichever. All right. Well, anyway. Damn it. Anyway, there's different watch faces you can get. Nothing works when you want it to work. It's like brightness doesn't seem to like work with this camera, with the camera. Here we go. There we go. Now you can see, if you see, for some reason there, it was good for a second. Now it went, oh, that's better, because it just took the brightness out of it. You see the minute, there's a second hand, and the second hand is moving, but the minute hand is straight down. The hour hand is a little bit, off to the side, but the minute hand is the one that's straight down. Well, the minute hand you can't see moving. You see the second hand moving. Okay, so the timing, the way it's been explained to me, and I'm trying to just turn this off, keep that charge. I charged that USB on that watch on that USB thing. Okay, so it's like a second hand of a clock. It's just the way this whole clockwork universe works, which is freaky. It's the same as why does the one side of the moon always seem to, face us? And why is it coincidentally does the moon, cover the sun in a solar eclipse? Like there's all these weird clockwork, coincidental things, right? That have scientific explanations. People can, scientists sit there and scribble on chalkboards and explain it to it and write all these formulas about it. Mathematics, but it's still when you look at it, like I say, in the aggregate, when you look at everything all together, there's just too many coincidences, right? It's weird. Well, anyway, the sun has cycles. It has 11-year cycles, which I talked about before, which are the reason why, say 11 years ago, you had some hot weather when, we were at solar maximum, more sunspots. You're going to have some hot days, less sunspots, less, all right, colder days. But then there's grand cycles. There's 400-year cycles, right? There's 1,000-year cycles. There's 12,000-year cycles. And then there's like 24,000-year cycles, right? It's clockwork. And that's another weird thing too, that the 12, and the 24,000-year cycles correspond and with the Earth's width. And yeah, so it's like we're spinning fast, but because of the circumference, because we're it's like clockwork, it's like the minute hand, which you don't even know you're moving. The only way you really know you're moving is sometimes if you lay back, like sometimes you see clouds moving, but I mean, if you lay back and you watch the stars or something, which most people can't see stars anymore, and you realize how slow, we're in perspective. It's like a minute hand. You can't really notice the movement. Well, anyway, that's like a little primer introduction to what we're going to be getting into in the coming days, weeks, and months as I deal with this stuff, because we've got far bigger things to deal with than all this glamour and magic, misdirection that they're trying to throw. This is, because see, who cares about the organized crime syndicates, right? It's like the same thing when the mob, and these protection rackets and these gangs run a street corner or something like that. The thing you want to do is, do you want to confront them? Do you think you're going to support, the people who are saying, oh, we're going to get rid of these gangs? No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. They got rid of the mafia and then it's gotten replaced by all these other gangs. And, the cities are the crime rate, Chicago, it's ridiculous. The amount of murders last year or in 2018 or 2019, the last time the statistics I saw on the CDC, there were 19,000 homicides in the US alone. 19,141. I've looked that statistic up a couple of times, so I have it memorized. 19,141. So you're not going to change, gangs and organized crime and all that kind of stuff. It's an exercise in futility. And so what I'm trying to say is forget about campaign contributions, forget about politics, the cult of personality. Things have been getting worse. We've been spiraling down for decades. This isn't like some new phenomenon. All right. So you have to just, if there's gangs on that street corner, you got two choices. You move, out of the neighborhood, right? Or you just avoid them like the plague. You know, I mean, let's face it. So, as far as I'm concerned, with politics and all that game and this organized crime syndicate and this authoritarian takeover of the Western civilization, the former United States, forget about that. What you got to start thinking about is your own life and living and getting through this, because we're going to see massive inflation, massive unemployment, right? And living in a totalitarian state. So that's what your focus has to be on. It's survive, but you got to thrive. You want to live. And if you've got a family, you want your family to live and be happy and whatever. So that's my focus on this is telling people, I'm trying to explain to them that there is this thing, going on, and it's been going on. And yes, the world is run by an organized crime syndicate. That's why they never got rid of the poppy fields in Afghanistan, which is the number one producer of heroin. And we had troops over there for 20 years who have told me that they were protecting the poppy fields. Well, who protects poppy fields in the heroin trade? The organized crime syndicate that runs the frickin' world, the Davos set, the World Economic Forum, right? I mean, get with it. This is a real thing. This is really going on, right? So that's what it's all about. So you are nothing more than this. That's all you are to them. And I'll continue this discussion tomorrow.
Elvis has left the building. Thank you and good night.
Cheers. Good luck.